Hello and welcome to the Wealthy Wellbeing Podcast, where we talk about all things health, fitness, real estate, and entrepreneurship. My name is Zach Bush, and I am your host. Today, I have a good friend of mine, Dan Skrima. Dan, thanks for coming on the show today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, bud.
So, you go to the gym that I go to. You've been there for a few years now. Why don't you give everybody a little background on like who you are, what you do, and how you got to where you are today?
Sure. Yeah. I've been going to that. I've been going to the same gym since 2019. So it's been a while now. Years are piling up. But during the day, I'm in tech. I'm a tech manager for a company up in Boston. I work fully remote from home. Work for them for about 2.5 years now. And then, once my three kids are in bed, I generally go to my shop and I make custom furniture. So I'm a woodworker at night, and I've been doing that roughly the same amount of time since officially with an official company, registered company since 2019. But I've been making furniture for about 9 years now, and started from knowing very little and learning mostly through YouTube and trial and error and just kind of figuring it out as I went. And every project is another challenge. I always try to keep doing a little bit more than I am capable of doing, or at least I have done before. And I like to push myself with it. And then the latest endeavor is taking that skill of making stuff myself and teaching it to others, and having a community built around making. So I'm starting a makerspace in the Hatboro Horsham area, just outside of Philadelphia in the suburbs, and been planning that for this entire year, with everything from business plan to financials to talking to every kind of contractor and other makerspace owner and honestly any entrepreneur in general in the area that I can kind of squeeze any experience out of, because it's my first time doing that and first time creating a legitimate business with enterprise and employees and all that kind of stuff. And I'm trying to make that happen this year. So last year was all the 2024 was all about planning and laying the groundwork, and 2025 is going to be actually doing the thing, which is still many forks in many roads to encounter, but it's progressing. So it's where I expected it to be by now. So
That's good. That's good. And I think anything that is worth doing takes time. And I know the
yeah,
patience is hard to have sometimes going through that, going through the long cycle and, ups and downs and unsure and all that. But, it sounds like you're in a good space, a good mental space with like where it's progressing. And you're like, okay, it's fine. Like we've got the foundation we need. And I think that's important to get the
right.
foundation. So I
Yeah,
definitely want to talk about that because I know we had a
sure.
conversation like a week or two ago about it. But let's go back to the woodworking. That's kind of where this all started.
Yeah.
So you've been doing that officially for a couple of years. You started about 9 years ago. What got you started into that? What got you interested in woodworking?
So I was always someone that wanted to do stuff with my hands, and I never really had that itch scratched doing computer stuff. So I made my career as a web developer, and then moved into cloud engineering, and now I'm a manager at that. So I do even less hands-on stuff. So when I moved into our current house with my wife, it was our first house that we bought together. It was new construction, but there was one tree that they left, but it happened to be a horrible decision for them to even keep it. It was, 70 feet in the air, no branches because it was competing for light, and it was going to fall down at some point. So we just had it cut down. It was just safer to have it cut down. And instead of, I don't know what the impetus was for me to just not have the tree company take it away. I knew the tree company owner, and I said, just leave the logs, leave 8-foot logs. And I called a local sawmill. They have portable sawmill services to come mill it up into 2-inch thick planks. And I just learned on YouTube how to stack and sticker lumber and air dry it. So I had stacks of lumber within about, I want to say, 6 months of moving into my house. I was already stacking lumber in the yard, which my wife is thrilled about. Um, but I just wanted to do something with it. So I started selling slabs on Facebook Market, and people started coming to me and just looking at slabs and buying them from me. And out of the 4 logs worth of slabs that I had, within a couple slabs sold, it already paid for the entire tree removal.
Mm.
I'm like, this is something where I could do a side hustle. I could just have mill lumber and sell it. I mean, how hard could it be? It's really just storing it and then having people come take it. So I had no idea what I was doing. Um, but then one person said, well, could you, like, I don't know what I'm doing. Could you turn that into like a coffee table? I'm like,
Mm.
sure. I don't know. Sure. Why not? I don't know again, I don't know what I'm doing. So let's go from there. So 4 hairpin legs and some sanding and finish. I was like, all right, that can't be that bad. They were happy with it. So whatever. And then I decided at that point to take a really big leap and dry it fully as much as I thought I was drying it fully. And then I made a trestle dining table for one of my best friends for his wedding present for a house that him and his wife bought, which was a very ambitious undertaking to build an entire table with joinery. I didn't have tools, I didn't have a shop, I didn't have a workbench, I didn't have anything. But I immediately caught the bug of making stuff with my hands, and it was so
Mm.
satisfying. Every step was satisfying. So it was crude at times. And what's funny is years later, I visited his house after I delivered it. By the way, it took me 9 months to make that table, uh, a ridiculous amount of time. But every single part of it was a learning experience. So
Mhm.
I was getting paid in experience.
Mhm. Mm.
I delivered it. It looked great. He was so happy. Him and his wife were thrilled. And then I went back over a couple years later and I saw how potato chippy the top had twisted. I'm like, oh my
Mm.
God, I can't leave that. That's gonna absolutely kill me. And I realized this because I didn't know how to dry wood. It wasn't fully dried yet. Whatever. It moved all over the place. So I ended up taking the table back from them a year ago. So like 8 years after I gave it to them, and I took it back to my shop and I completely fixed the entire thing and
Mm.
redid the top, surfaced it flat again, redid some joinery, did all the stuff and brought it back again. So now they're good to go. But I just couldn't leave it the way it was. That was just gonna drive me nuts. But that was my you know, first entry into actually making stuff in woodworking, and that it just built from there. And then I started taking on commissions and small ones. It started with very small ones. I started doing local farmers markets. I did some, New Hope, whatever they call the autumn fall festival and stuff like that. And I started selling some stuff. And every project got a little bit more complicated and a little bit more professional looking, um, until I got to a point where I started establishing the business and paying rent at a local place. Um,
Mm.
and I started getting my shop out of my basement, which was also that made my wife happy because now I didn't have the shop in the basement, wasn't making noise at night, and started moving all my stacks of lumber over to the lumber yard that I have now. So once I got out of my house, it kind of made it feel a little bit more real. I got used to going into the shop at night and working on some stuff and being surrounded by other people that were professionals and knew what they were doing. And from there, I just started learning through
Mhm.
osmosis, just watching them and watching more advanced YouTube videos and things like that, and just trying stuff. So yeah, that's how it got
Right.
started. And now I'm at the point where I'm comfortable doing most things, and I know things. I know where my abilities stop, and where I should either pass it off to somebody else, or just not charge that much because I'm not sure how it's going to turn out. So I'm at that level now, which is pretty I'm pretty satisfied with.
Mhm. And you said you kind of like used YouTube as your main way to learn stuff. I
It
mean, would you
was.
say that and did you have anybody else that you like bounce stuff off ideas? I mean, obviously it was like trial by error, but
Yeah,
like
yeah.
YouTube was it.
Yeah, so for me, I have to learn by screwing up myself. I
Mm.
have to. If you're comparing, like auditory versus visual learning, I'm much more visual. So
Mhm.
reading books and doing that kind of stuff. I know you want to get into that a little later, but it's not really the way I learn. I have to be physically doing it, and if I'm not sure if something's going to work out or not, I'm probably going to end up making two or three of them because the first one's going to be horrible, the second one's going to be a little better. And there are a couple accounts on YouTube that are specific to not just being and it's changed over the last 10 years, but when I was starting, it wasn't just content creation for entertainment purposes where you have anybody watching a woodworking channel because they like the cool things they're making. It was more education based.
Mhm.
So if you go 10 years back and you some of the larger, woodworking YouTube accounts, they were doing tutorials and they were doing step by step. Here is how I'm using this joinery for this table. And it was like you were in person in school. And it's all free content. So that's pretty much where I started out. And then over the years, now it's gotten down this weird road of just kind of shock value doing crazy things, and now it's not as educational as it once was, but there's a good chunk of time there. It's a good 10-year span where it was very educational and you could learn a lot by doing it.
Yeah, I love what you said too about, obviously everybody learns differently, right? You know how you learn, and that's great. But what is most effective for you? And I think most people too, like I might learn better by reading and then applying, and you might learn better by seeing and then applying. But it's the second part of that equation that you have to start doing stuff and you have to screw up. I think people get so worried, including myself, get so worried about screwing it up that
Right.
they don't even do anything. And the
Right.
only way to really learn is to fail over and over and over again. So
Right.
I mean, you've been doing this for a while. What was that learning curve? What did that look like for you? Like, how long did it take for you? How many hours do you think it took for you to be like at least feeling much more competent in than when you first started?
Honestly, it took a couple of years for woodworking. It took a couple of years because the thing is with commission work, especially, you're not doing the same thing twice in a row. You might not do the same thing again. So it's really just taking the concepts and understanding techniques on how to do something. Jig making is a huge part of woodworking. So a lot of it is literally just how do I make that cut, and that's literally
Mm,
probably half of what a project is. How do I make that cut? How do I make it safely is something that you learn later because you don't do it safely in the beginning and you pay for it. Um, but how do I do that cut, and what is the orientation I need to hold a piece of wood in like a stable way and run it through a blade or run, a router over it, whatever the case is.
mm,
It takes a couple of years to get comfortable with the tools enough to do that. In the beginning, you're extreme you should be anyway, you're extremely scared of tools because
mm,
everything can hurt you and cut your fingers off and all that kind of stuff. You learn over time that as long as you are in control and your mind is fully engaged in exactly what you're doing and on nothing else, you're not going to get hurt. You really aren't.
mm,
You could screw up the cut, you can cut it too short, the angle wasn't what you thought it would be, or whatever it might be, but you're at least not going to get hurt if you're there and you're present. That is when people get hurt in a wood shop, is when they're either doing something repetitive and they think they don't need to think about it and they're just running stuff through a table saw, boom, boom, boom. Like if you're cutting 150 slats for a bunch of cutting boards, it's mindless. It really is.
mm.
This is so, I've been doing this for years now. That's when people get hurt because they're not actually present. So once you get into that mindset of as long as I'm using a tool safely and I'm present, I'm good. And that does come with a little bit of maturity of being in the shop.
Mhm. Would you say that
But
that ability where you have to be focused and present, that helped, like, that you hear it getting in the zone, and people with everything going on with social media and TV and
yep,
everything that's happening, your attention is a million different spots. Would you say it's like a spot that you found where I can just focus on this and nothing else matters,
yeah.
right? It's being at the gym. It's my hour of the day where nothing else outside of these doors matters. Does that kind of helped as part of this journey?
It absolutely does. And so for someone with, I'm a poster child for ADHD. That's literally what my neurologist told me when I went to my first appointment. He's like, I'm just watching you. You're just all over the place. And you can tell me I'm squirming just sitting here. Um, I do woodworking because it has to slow me down and I have to be very thoughtful of what I'm doing. And honestly, I don't think I would have gotten to this point if I didn't put pressure on myself by having a paying client.
Mm,
So a couple things, like the paying client is a big thing because you I'm not someone that breaks promises. If you promise the client that you're going to finish something, then you have to finish it. It's not that house project and that shelf you haven't hung for 4 years. It's not that, because someone's relying on you to get what they paid for. So that customer loyalty is something that is really, really strong with me. So getting it done is kind of the most important thing. The second thing is being in a shop with other people that know more than me is also really important to me. Because you don't want to look like an idiot when you're doing stuff. You really don't. It's just like a pride thing.
Mm,
And if you're in a spot where you could do something really stupid and get hurt, or you can just ask, it's better
mhm.
to just ask. Um, and then you get into a point where you've done enough things enough times where you don't really have to ask. You just have to take an extra beat and think about it for a second, and really focus in on what you're doing. So that's why I do it. It slows me down, and it's just very mindful. And everything has to be very exact. There are certain rules you can break once you get the experience, but for the most part, it's literally just being present and slowing down. So it's one of those, you go slow to go fast type of
Mm.
scenarios.
Yeah, I like what you said about be surrounding yourself with people that are better than you. I mean, that applies in all areas. When you go to the gym, right? You want to be with around people who are pushing themselves a little bit more because it makes you want to push yourself a little bit more. It makes you a
Absolutely.
little bit more motivated and excited to go. And so
Yep.
it's important to do that, right? In business too, it's the same thing. Like I want to be somebody around somebody doing more than me because they're doing something slightly different, right? They have the
Yep.
experience, but I can watch them and see them do something, be like, oh, that's a good idea. Like I can take that
Right.
away. And most importantly, when you have a question or not sure what the next step is, they're right there. They're able to help you and they want to help you. And I think that's
Sure.
super important to highlight. And I love that you brought that up.
Absolutely. And honestly, that's where the allure of a makerspace is, because you're literally surrounded by other people who are making really cool stuff. You're there's an instructor looking over your shoulder, making sure you're being safe. Just that extra set of eyes is really important for someone to get better at the craft. And that, again, like you said, it's in any discipline, any space. If you're a realtor and you're working in an office next to a realtor and they're crushing it and working hard and making a lot of money doing it, you're going to want to do the same thing. You're in the
Mhm.
gym, someone's doing the work and doing the extra reps and warm up because they know they're going to perform better. You're just going to replicate that because you see them succeed. It's like that with everything.
Mhm. So you talked about kind of surrounding yourself with other people. What for somebody who's looking to get started in this? What's something that you would recommend they do? We talked about a couple of things, but is there something
Sure.
that we haven't talked about that you would recommend? Hey, like I wish I had told myself this, or I wish I had knew this day one that this would be the best place to start, or this is the best piece of information, or first tool to get, or any kind of piece of
Sure.
advice for somebody new.
Honestly, it's doing getting that first project just out of the way, doing something and just trying to copy it. And it could be as simple as a cutting board. You only need a table saw. If it's not really too expensive to get into it at that point. Um, there are maker spaces everywhere. There are small ones. There are woodworking clubs on Facebook that meet up regularly. There are social media groups all over the place. If you were getting into this type of thing, for me, YouTube was great. Nowadays, it might be a little tougher unless you start looking back at some early stuff, but just getting into it by doing that first thing, because you're going to know if you have the bug pretty quickly. Because it's a lot of fun. Once you start getting into it and once you start making stuff, it's the same it's the same thing as if you're just DIYing something in your house. Like I was saying in our other group the other day, like if you paint a room in your house, you're walking by it like 20 times a day. You're just looking in the room. You're just turning on the light when it's dark before bedtime. You're like very, very proud of it. And that sense of accomplishment is very easily attained in woodworking, because it doesn't take a large project to give you that sense of pride and tell people that you made that thing that's in your kitchen. It's actually pretty cool.
Yeah, we've done some projects in our house, and I'm definitely not the most handy. And while it's in it, I definitely get to the point where like, oh man, this sucks. I can't wait till this is done. But when you're done and you like said can look back and walk by it, you're like,
Oh
okay,
yeah.
I did that. That was
Yeah.
all me, and that feels really good. Do I want to jump right into the next thing? Not me, not right away. But yes,
Right.
it's
Right.
there is some
Right.
level of satisfaction to it.
Yeah, yeah. And honestly, that's the tough part about commissions. A lot of people start by getting into commissions. Um, it does take a toll on you, just stress level and mentally. It takes a toll on you, especially if it's a project that's challenging or it's a high priced item, where you have to think, would I pay what I'm charging somebody for that project? And that's an important thing because eventually you need to make money doing this. So you need to charge a hefty amount of money for custom furniture. But at the same time, if you're not willing to pay for that, if the quality is not there, then you're not proud of it. The quality really needs to match what you're charging people. So that
Mhm.
additional stress is rough in commission projects. But you also, like I was saying before, sometimes you're not doing that same project for years potentially. And so it's hard to get a rhythm and get really good at some of the things that you have to do. So every project doesn't go as quickly as you think it's going to go. Um, and some projects, if you get to a point where maybe you're doing this full time, or this is kind of your, your income that you really rely on, um, you don't have time to screw up every step of the way. Like you really need to get it done and get it out the door and have the client happy with it so you get paid and move on. But commissions are a little rough that way. Um,
Mhm.
you try to pepper in other projects, so you're not jumping into another complicated, stressful project one after another. It's nice to have some layups kind of in the middle. Even
Mhm.
personal projects, just doing stuff to like that are just fun, just to
Mhm.
keep kind of the spark alive, so you don't turn it into that job that you hate, just like everything else. Um, that's kind of important. Is keeping it fun. It's hard to
Mhm.
do that when you're really stressed out, but it's important to kind of fit stuff in.
Yeah, I like that because it's easy. You always hear people like, "Oh, don't turn your hobby into a job," right? Like it's easy to do that because you
Right.
get obsessed with it, and because you get so passionate about it, it becomes stressful. And so, like I
Right.
think it's good advice to be able to be like, "Hey, like do a passion project or do something that's fun or easy to kind of like reset yourself or to balance out the stressful part of it." So I
Sure.
love that, and I love that you talked about being doing commission work and all that. So I wanted to dive. The couple questions that I had for you was, what a couple different things. What is the hardest thing that you've had to make? Whether that like was the most learning that you had to do, or just like the most complex and intricate.
So let's see, the most complex. So I've done a couple things where I either had kind of like secret drawers or secret doors or things like that,
Mhm.
which are always fun, but it's hard to conceptualize a lot of how it works until you're already in it working on it. So again, I won't even say there are two types. There are some commission furniture places that, especially the high end ones, where either you're working with a designer or maybe it's just the client directly, where they can't really visualize what they want until they see it, or you can't build it until you can visualize it. So you're going to SketchUp or Fusion 360 or some software to create a real life rendering so they could see it. A lot of people go down that route because then they could estimate their materials more accurately. They know where all the joinery is going. Like there are people that are planners that love doing that. I'm not that guy. I'm more of that, let's start building it. I kind of have an idea and let's see where it goes.
Mhm.
That gets very, very stressful. So there have been a couple projects where you really don't know how it's going to go until you're in it. Um,
Mhm.
and that gets really stressful. So probably ironically, the most difficult project isn't really focused so much in wood. It's more with epoxy because
Mhm.
that's still something that's super super popular. Even though it's kind of had its wave, now it's kind of dying off a little bit. But someone came to me and they said, I want a wood table with a wood base, but I want it to have epoxy in it, and I want it to look like there are two different oceans meeting. So one that's like a lighter blue, one that's a darker blue, but have it look like it's waves crashing on rocks with the white foam and the whole thing. So it was much more of an artistic piece, and that's not
Mhm.
typically something I do. Um, I'm much more of a utilitarian woodworker at this point. I don't have the design background, and as much as I'd love to be artistic, I don't know if I'd feel comfortable charging someone for an artistic thing from me. But this was an important client, a friend of a friend. She was going through a rough time. She just really wanted something like this, so I said yes. Um, and it was a lot of learning because I had never used certain epoxies I was using. I've certainly never done artistic type of epoxy things like this. And it was a somewhat large table. It was a 5 foot diameter round table with a
Mhm.
with a single pedestal base. So that was probably the hardest because there were a lot of steps to make sure that epoxy doesn't leak all over your shop. There's a lot of steps to finishing it. There are a lot of steps to make the clear parts of epoxy stay clear. You have to set up your shop for a certain temperature so that it cures the right way. You have to use a certain kind of epoxy so that all the bubbles escape, so you don't have this cloudy bubble, mess inside of it. There's a lot involved in it, and you're fitting all these wood pieces into a round mold and cutting the diameters of the edges so that they fit just right, so you're not wasting epoxy, because that's a ton of money. I mean, there was probably $1,500 just in epoxy alone in this project. So now you're also talking about, I also can't screw this up, because it's literally all my profit coming from this commission is in the epoxy. So when you start combining an unknown method with an unknown material with something you don't generally do anyway, but it still costs a lot of money, it's like that amount of stress really does kind of get to you. So at some point you got to feel confident enough to just do it. I'm just going to do this right now. I'm going to read about it. I'm going to do what I need to do, and I'm just going to execute on it. And it gets scary, because if epoxy leaks, you're screwed. You have to keep checking it often. So that's probably the most difficult in terms of execution that I've had, for sure. And I've had other things that are just scale. I had a guy that he came in with two black cherry slabs that he bought off a farmer somewhere around him. And they were both, each one of them was 11 feet long and almost 4 feet wide. And he wanted them end to end, like butt end to end, 2 Thanksgivings ago. And I had 3 weeks to turn that into a 22-foot long table, which was exhausting because it's hard. It's hard just physically to move them around.
Right.
And just the finishing process and sanding, and they were both live edge. So doing the live edge treatment that you needed to do on them and keeping them flat and all this other stuff. It was a lot. We had to use a chain hoist just to move them around the shop. So that was probably the most difficult in terms of scale. So yeah, there have been a couple fun ones. Would I do those projects again? I say no, but I'd probably say yes, because they pay well.
Yeah, sure. And so those are the hardest ones. Now, do you have like a favorite one, if one of those wasn't already your favorite one?
The favorite ones are the small ones, honestly, because I've made several engagement ring boxes. Those are really fun. Those are fun just because just how much it means to the person that you're making it for. I've probably made maybe 8 or 9 engagement ring boxes. And then you see it all over social media after, the proposal and all that kind of stuff. That's always really, really cool. And then it's fun when my family orders stuff. My family's not great clients because I can't charge them that much. But some of the projects that they've asked me to do are really cool. Like laser engraved family tree for my grandmother. I come from a very large family, so in great laser engraving all of the names onto this thing and having this big framed family tree where all the names are kind of hanging from hooks and all that kind of stuff. Some of those projects are really, really cool. Some of the sentimental ones. And I do get a lot of those. A guy just recently brought me just a big cookie of a tree that fell in his yard that was super sentimental to him, and he just wants it as a table, and he's willing to pay for it, and that's great. And I just know when it's done, he's going to be super, super excited. Because you can see that he was getting emotional just dropping it off. So that kind of stuff's really cool, because that kind of makes you connect with people. So.
And that's what's important, right? I mean, that's the big thing, and that's to make a difference to somebody else. There's the satisfaction of completing a project, but the satisfaction of completing a project and knowing that it's gonna make a difference in somebody's life is just an additional extra to it.
And especially because the whole time you're doing it, you are worrying that they're gonna like it. You really are. It's the same thing before you propose to your wife. Like, she's gonna say yes, but you're still really nervous that maybe she doesn't. It's the same kind of thing. So when you bring it off the truck, they're like, "Oh my god, it's exactly what I wanted." Like that's really, really cool.
So those are all of your current projects that you're doing. So let's talk about the other thing that you mentioned, the makerspace. We talked
Sure.
about the community aspect of it. So what is a makerspace, and what are you hoping to achieve at your makerspace?
Sure. So, Makerspace in general is just a facility that has all the tools you need to get into a craft or a discipline that you don't have the opportunity to have at home, and learn that craft through classes, through one-on-one instruction, through just being around the community, similar to what we were talking about before with my shop. And so, what I'm looking to do, I'm focusing on woodworking primarily in the beginning, because that's what I'm comfortable with. uh, Lots of maker spaces have a broad scale of different things that they offer. A lot of there's a maker space down in North Philly called Next Fab. Um, they have a wood shop, they have a metal shop that you do some blacksmithing there. You could do leather work. You could do 3D printing. You could do electronics, computerized stuff. Like you can do a lot of different things. I'm focusing on woodworking to start, and then the eventual goal is to expand beyond woodworking into probably metal and blacksmithing and leather and sewing and that kind of stuff.
Mm,
Um, but the big draw around this area specifically is that there are so many condos and apartment buildings going up that no one has a garage or a basement or any real ability to get into this craft at all. So the fact that it is, overall, it's a dying craft for the people that make commission custom furniture. That that craft isn't dying if you start giving everybody the opportunity to continue doing it. And that opportunity is not there right now. There are a lot of videos on YouTube that show like, you know, these people grow over years and they have these very impressive in shops with all these expensive tools, but then they start going back and they answer the question of, well, how much is it to actually get started without that, you know, $4,000 table saw? Like what else can I do with some tools I can buy at Home Depot?
mm,
Um, and they go through those, and after a while it's like it's still pretty expensive to get into it. Even for modest tools, even for the beginner set of tools that aren't great, it's still hundreds if not thousands of dollars to get into this, to do a full project with everything that you need. um, so this is a way of giving that opportunity to someone. It's the same model as a gym that has all the equipment and you just come in and use it for a monthly fee. So that's the same kind of model here. Um, with the caveat that we also have, similar to how you would have personal trainers at gyms, we would have one-on-one instruction available that you could book, and then there are a lot of group classes. So
mm,
group classes can range from anything from I've literally never touched any of these tools before and I walk away with a cutting board, or the people that have had their own shops, they have established commission businesses, but they've never made a rocking chair and it's a complicated project to do. I'm gonna pony up some money and spend 40 hours in a 5 day long immersive class making rocking chairs.
mm,
That and then gain all the skills from doing that to be able to go back to your own shop and do that. We're gonna have those kinds of classes taught by instructors that come from all over the country, that people would book classes just because those individuals are teaching them, which is actually pretty
mm,
cool. So that is what I envision the makerspace, is a place where you can come work on projects, be surrounded by other people that are also creating things and building things with their hands, kind of get that enthusiasm built up, and be a place where you can still hang out when you have stuff sitting in clamps and gluing
mm,
up. Like I have half an hour to kill. I could either leave, or I could talk with my buddy who I just met who's doing some stuff and talk to him about his project, go grab a coffee in the lounge that we have, you know, play some ping pong, shoot shuffleboard, and listen to the music as I'm watching other people build stuff. Just creating a community vibe around there we can hang out for a little while is actually going to be a big thing. So in the beginning when we open is going to be mostly a lot of live demos that are free. Just come in, grab a free beer and hang out and watch some demos and people working on stuff. Just see the shop for yourself.
mm.
I think just from people seeing it, they're going to get real excited and start signing up for stuff.
Yeah, definitely. That model's great too. Just like the monthly fee, that's just easy for people to grasp, understand. The gym concept is the same thing. Especially a lot of gyms now are taking what CrossFit build and doing the group classes. Like that's a really really
Yep.
big thing. I mean, they've always been around, but even more now. So,
Right.
and my buddy is the same thing. He's got his own house, but it's like it's a twin, and so it's still smaller. The garage is small, and he doesn't have enough room for all of the equipment that he wants or
Right.
needs to do the woodworking
Right.
that he wants to. So it's perfect for that. It's like, now I don't have to worry about buying thousands and thousands of dollars of equipment that I can't even fit in
Right.
my house. I can go and use this whenever, however. And not only that, I'm now not any longer in my basement or my garage alone
Sure.
like you started. I'm in the
Right.
community of people doing similar things that are ahead of me, and now I can use that community and make friends. Like we've made friends at the gym. It's
Absolutely.
just now it's in a different vehicle.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, and that's the thing. I wonder just how much faster I would have gotten to the level I'm at now if I was surrounded by those people when I started. I mean, that would have been huge. The amount of times that I screwed up glue ups because I thought I was doing it right, and until someone showed me that I wasn't, everything got easier. I'm like, that just made my life so much better just from that simple thing. And eh, having a place where it's you want to keep going there because there's always something else happening. The classes, there will be certain classes are on a regular schedule for the beginners that want to get in there, but some of those intermediate and advanced classes that are on kind of a much longer cadence where we might only have that humidifier building course like one every 6 months. Like people would be really excited for when that course comes along because especially from people that have taken it, they'll be talking to the other members about it, but like wait for the the humidor course, you're going to love it. And stuff like that, and having a constant an ever changing class schedule, I think that's going to be really exciting because there's always something different. um
Mhm.
and there's so many different aspects of woodworking that you can get into that you don't realize, and you don't know which one is really going to click with you either. um it's it's a single discipline that has so many different facets to it, that certain people just fall in love with doing certain things. I mean, there are people that I know that just turn bowls and turn
Mhm.
pens, and they love the lathe so much, and they're done with their projects within a few minutes, and they love
Mhm.
batching them out and then selling them online. And they've been doing it for years, and they're not sick of it because it is so much fun. And then other people love building kitchen cabinets and islands and things like that. Some people love pouring epoxy river tables. But you can find your thing because you'll have a chance to try a lot of different stuff.
Mhm. And that's like the health and fitness thing too, is there's so many different ways to exercise. You can run, you can
Yeah,
bike, you can do
right.
CrossFit. It's the same thing where it's like, hey, you have all of these options. I mean, in this case, it's all in one space, which is nice.
Right.
Like now I can
Yeah.
try the different things all in those different spots. Like CrossFit's nice because it does a bunch of different things, but like you're kind of pinned into doing all of
Yeah.
the things at the same time. So
Hmm.
you can try all those different things and go, like people love running. I don't mind running, but I don't love running. There's a person in my neighborhood that's
Right.
run every morning when I'm on my way to the gym at 4:45. They're running every morning. I don't want to do that, but
Yeah.
they love it. Just like somebody loves making, churning out the spoon. Somebody likes making cabinets. Somebody else likes rowing. So it's like it's the options. You got to figure out what
Yep.
you love, and it just might take some time. So having a space where you can try a bunch of different things and having somebody kind
Yep.
of help guide you along the way is huge.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, and it's this whole endeavor has taken me to a completely different place by becoming an entrepreneur. I mean,
Mhm.
I've always known that that was going to be a road, but I don't have any training in it. I've never taken business classes. I've never
Mhm.
taken finance classes. I'm learning all of that stuff, not really on the fly because I am taking my time doing it. But again, the same reason why you're going to try to do a good job if someone's looking over your shoulder. I'm trying to start a business when I have a wife, a mortgage, and 3 kids, and
Mhm.
I make good money at my job right now. My goal is to do this full time and be this
Mhm.
makerspace owner, entrepreneur full time, and that kind of a risk is enormous and petrifying. So taking my time doing that is something that I've really stressed at, and I have to, especially because not only is it a risk for myself and my family, but it's if I'm going to have employees that have
Mhm.
salaries and benefits, I am now responsible for them too. And I already feel that burden, and I'm not even open yet. Um, but that I feel like I have to. I mean, I have a responsibility then to do all my due diligence to make sure it's successful as well. Um, so that's been really fun too. I took an entrepreneurship course at Wharton earlier this year as well, which was like a 3 month course, and that was it was a little bit dated, but overall it was very eye opening for a lot of the different ways of doing business and developing your models and financing strategies and all that kind of stuff. So, just like woodworking, I'm diving in headfirst into, running a business. And that's been taking a million turns all the ways. So
Yeah, so you started. So this year you spent most of the time kind of laying out the foundation, like you mentioned earlier. So
yeah,
when did this idea of I want to create this makerspace? When did that seed get planted, and how has that progressed over however long it's been?
it's been years. That idea came years ago. So I go to this event every year in upstate New York called Maker Camp. And it's 4 days long, surrounded by other people that are making stuff across all different crafts and disciplines and everything. And you're literally just doing workshops and talking to people and meeting people and doing all these fun things. And a lot of the instructors there work at maker spaces or own them or run them or whatever. So you talk to a lot of those people, and just the way that they talk about them and the vibe that they're describing is so unique and fun. That planted the seed in years ago that I've wanted to get this started. But the thought of doing that is also very overwhelming. I mean, just you know, having to organize that much curriculum and all the day-to-day operation of members and payments and classes and schedules and all that stuff. It's a lot. But once you break it down, it's just one thing at a time. It's been going very well. I've leaned on a lot of others for guidance on that. I've started talking with I did for months. I talked with Score. It's a volunteer organization from the SBA that help you build your business plan for
Mhm.
free, and talk to you about all the different things because they are entrepreneurs. They're just volunteering their time. Talking to those guys have been great. Going to small business expos down in Philly and talking to small business owners there has been really good. Um, and it's been cool because I've gotten to the point now where just writing a business plan took probably 7 months of the year to really write that thing. I mean, it's like whatever 20 pages long of every aspect of the business. Um, and having that finished and having 3-year financial projections complete is actually a huge burden lifted. That was a huge hump to get over. Um, and now we're at the bank. Now we're talking with the bank, and we're in deep talks with the bank. Every week we have a meeting with the bank to discuss more things. And we're just really ironing out all the details so that they can get behind it. And so far, the numbers are looking really good. So it's one of those things where I can't look at physical places until you have the money because
Yep.
the one guy it's funny. I all the way back in February, I think before this was I was scratching the surface. I started looking at buildings, and that was my first like wake up call. Like, you're going way too fast, because
Mhm.
the fourth building I saw, the realtor said, "So you have money to, like, if this works out for you and this is exactly what you're looking for, you're ready to like start talking paperwork and stuff, right?" I'm like, "Oh, no, no, no. I haven't talked to the bank yet. I haven't even started the loan process." He goes, "All right." He goes, "Here's my 2 cents. Unsolicited advice." I was like, "Okay." He goes, "You're going to run into the same building owners." Because
Mhm.
building owners are entrepreneurs and they buy buildings, and they're going
Yep.
to own a lot more buildings, and they talk to each other. So if you're a tire kicker, that's fine, but you can't keep doing it because they're eventually not going to take you seriously and not even going to show you buildings. They're not going to return your calls.
Right.
So he's like, "Now you know how much it costs in this area. Put that in your plan and go get the money." I was like, "Got it."
Mhm.
So that was a good come down to earth. Like, you're going way too fast for this. You gotta do the other hard work first. And then we
Mhm.
can get into that stuff, which is really good to hear, because I need that. I need someone to keep me in check. So
Mhm. What's been the biggest thing you've learned through this process, at least thus far?
thus far, that hurdles that you encounter, some are larger than you think, and some are just not that large that you think are really big. You
Hmm.
really just have to do the work to determine what the size of the hurdle is. Um, I didn't think that uh, I didn't think that getting an insurance quote from an insurance broker would be that hard because you're giving them all the information. Just give me a number. Just why is it that hard?
Hmm.
No, that conversation was 2, 3-hour conversations over the course of like several weeks to get
Hmm.
exactly what you're insuring, exactly what is the salary of all the people because of workers' comp. What is like, I need all the details. Um, and being the kind of person I am, the details are hard for me to really get down to that level. Um,
Hmm.
and the hard things were getting these numbers when you don't have a physical location. Like, how are you insuring a building that you can't give them the address of the building because it doesn't exist yet? Um,
Hmm.
Getting quotes for, like HVAC. Like, if I'm looking at warehouses, like a CrossFit box would be, it doesn't have air conditioning. I need air conditioning if I want people there in the summer. So, how much to put air conditioning in? And you talk to an HVAC
Hmm.
company, they're like, "All right, what's the address? We'll come take a look." I'm like, "I don't have an address. I'm just like, what are you talking about? Like, that variable is so wide that we can't even really give you a number, but I need a number." So those kind of things that you think aren't that bad, I'll just call a company up and they'll give me a number. Oh, 30 grand for HVAC. Okay, great, thanks. And you just jot it down. It's not that. So that kind of stuff's hard. And some of the
Hmm.
stuff that I thought would be difficult really isn't that difficult. Writing the business
Hmm.
plan itself wasn't that hard. It was just a mental hurdle. Once you start actually writing, it just kind of flowed off. I write like I speak. So I was just essentially talking to the computer and just having it write it down and then tweak it a little bit afterwards. But actually writing was not that hard. So the learning
Hmm.
thing on that is like, just can't worry about doing it. Just start doing it. I mean,
Hmm.
I feel like that is the lesson in so many things. Just stop worrying about it and just start.
Hmm.
um,
That's what,
so
and that's been the
that's
common theme. Yeah, that's been the common theme through this entire conversation. Is just like you're like, I don't really know. I'm just gonna start and figure it out along the way, and I'll screw it
yeah,
up, and it's gonna be
right.
whatever. And that's a common thread through a lot of the conversations I have with gym owners and anybody who's in fitness is like, hey, what's the biggest thing you recommend for somebody who's new that's looking to start trending in the right direction for health and fitness? And
Right.
everyone's just like, you got to just
Get
start.
up.
It doesn't have to be
Yeah.
perfect. Don't have to get the perfect plan. Like
Right.
that's the hesitation. There's the fear, there's the anxiety, and that unknown keeps you from doing it. So, oh, I'll research. As soon as I have everything perfectly
Yeah.
lined up,
Yeah.
that's when I'll start. But like then that
Yeah.
never happens. You never get started and you never learn from there.
I mean, that was honestly my hesitation for getting into I mean, I've been doing CrossFit now for 10 years. Um, Longer than that now, my God. It may not look it, but I have been. So my whole thing was I can't get into CrossFit yet because I'm not in shape. I can't
Mm-hmm.
get it. I'm gonna die if I start CrossFit right now. I'm completely out of shape. I can't run or row or do any of this. I've never lifted weights like that in Olympic style fashion. I don't know what I'm doing. There's no way. And then I moved to a place that was 2 buildings from a CrossFit. I'm like, all right, you know what? I guess I'm gonna go. I'll try it out. And then you just start to love it. You just start to really, enjoy feeling sore because you know that you've actually put in a lot of work. The
Mm-hmm.
same thing. It's just like, just go, just start going. You don't have to be anything to start anything. Just start doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100% agree. I love that. So you obviously have a lot going on with your W-2 and then the side commission pieces and now kind of building this together. Family, you mentioned all of that stuff going on. How do you find the balance to do it all and get it all done and keep your sanity to some level and have some time for yourself too?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, honestly, it's all about it's all about negotiating. I'm negotiating my time all the time. Um, I'm negotiating with myself my time.
Hmm.
So certain things that I don't miss if I don't have to miss them for certain reasons. Like, I always try to help to be home and put the kids to bed. I try. If I have stuff going on, if like, I'm hanging out with friends that I never get to see, then fine. My wife understands that. But for the most part, I try to get home for bedtime. I generally will pick them up from school. I do all this kind of stuff. So I have certain things that are my daily, everyday things that I do. I'm at CrossFit every single day at noon. That's kind of a non-negotiable unless I really can't for some other reason. Um, and then there are all the gaps in between that are kind of fluid. So sometimes if I'm just really tired, I will just take a nap. I will take a half hour nap because I just need
Mhm.
it. I know if I don't take a half hour nap and I do something else, then I'm going to be cranky later, and I need 30 minutes. So there are certain times where that gap in the have to do's and the daily tasks or whatever, those are kind of fluid. And I keep those open for a reason because my day changes daily depending on if I have a guy that needs to come pick up a piece, or I need to go to a house to do, an estimate on a built-in and do some measurements or whatever it might be, I will keep blocks of my day open to be kind of wherever the day takes me. That's what's going to be in those blocks. So I know every day that whatever from 3:45 to 4:45 before I pick up my kids, like that I kind of have open, so I could do some stuff with there. Sometimes I do nothing and I just hang out at my house. Sometimes I'm running around trying to pick stuff up right before I pick the kids up or whatever it is. um, so that's kind of how I keep most of my balance. The other negotiation is I don't sleep as much as I should. I mean, that's my own personal negotiation with myself. um, I'm normally in bed by 12:30, 1 every night. It's way too late, but that's just where I am in life right now.
Mhm.
And I don't I still I wake up at 7, so I'm not waking up super early. It's
Yeah.
still 6 hours. It's good. Like it's a multiple of an hour and a half sleep cycle, so it's okay. Um, so that's kind of how I get through, is having most of my day on a schedule and on kind of a routine, and then those middle parts I fill in with whatever dynamic thing happens that day. And that's the thing. I'm comfortable with chaos, just myself as a person. So, I came from a house with 9 kids. I'm comfortable with chaos. Um, so those little blocks of time in the middle, if I'm running around, I'm okay with that. I already know that I don't know what's going
Mhm.
to happen every morning in that block of time anyway. So I just kind of flow with it.
Yeah. I'm sure that's helped with all of this, building the entrepreneurship and building the business and all that. Like that,
Right.
entrepreneurship is chaos, right? You're like
It is.
stuff's popping up left and right. You solve one thing, another thing pops up, and it's
Yep.
always it's the running joke that you want to be an entrepreneur because you want to leave the 9 to 5, but now you're
Yes.
not
And now you
working
work
nine to
twenty four
five. You're
seven.
working 24/7.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And I already expected that's going to happen. And that's the thing. Do I wish that I had done this out of college? Do I wish that like I did this kind of a business, before I got married, before I have a house, before all this stuff? I say that maybe, yeah, but I would have rushed it. I would have
Mhm.
rushed it. I wouldn't have spent the time because I wouldn't have felt the risk. And honestly, like that is important for me to feel the risk, um, and to make sure that everything is checked and I'm hiring the right people to do the tasks that I don't know about. I'm hiring the tax person. I'm hiring the accountant. I'm hiring like those types of people to handle the things that I don't know about. Versus trying to, maybe in my youth I would have just taken that on. It's like, I'll figure that stuff out. So yeah,
Yeah,
so
that's about. I mean,
the
you talk.
chaos is good, but
Yeah, yeah, and you talked about stages of life, like, hey, this is just where I'm at, and I think you that is a stage of life where when you're in your 20s, you can go run and gun and be all
yeah,
over the place and go probably too fast. As long as you don't give up,
right,
you're gonna keep moving forward, and it doesn't sound like you would have. So I like that like comparison of like, hey, if I was young, I would be moving 7 times as fast, 10 times as fast, but I had less to
yeah,
lose and
right,
I have more time to make up for it, right? If I screw this up in my
yes,
20s, there's still a ton of horizon to go. Whereas like now, it's like I got other responsibilities, so I gotta go slower, but that's better for where I'm at right
it
now. And
is, it is,
maybe somebody, yeah, like that's what's big is like recognizing where you are in your life and personal too, right? Someone in their 30s
yeah,
might have a different perspective than somebody else in their 30s, but still,
right,
you just have to
right.
recognize where you're at, what you're comfortable with, and move forward with that from there.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. People go through, I don't know what the average is of career changes nowadays. I'm still a lot. And people do that, and that's fine. But this is different than a career change from I'm sitting at a desk doing real estate and now I'm sitting at a desk doing whatever else. And now I'm like teaching, I'm doing something like, it's a little different for me because this is sitting at a desk versus owning an entire thing and then having employees and then running a whole community into like it's complete night and day, and it's petrifying because
Mhm.
I've never done that before. So I want to make sure that I get it right. So this is the right age that I should be doing this because I feel like I have the maturity to make those decisions now with obviously with a spouse who can also keep me in check, and which is really good to have, and then other people
Mhm.
around me who I'm watching grow small businesses, talking to them and learning from their mistakes too. So yeah, it's been a really fun road so far.
Awesome. I love that. So before we hop off, you talked about you learned a lot through YouTube. I know you listened to some books. Is there any books that you've listened to recently or in general that have kind of helped you, either with this current or new venture or just in general?
So see, that's the thing. So I'm all over the place with where I get my information, because some things are still YouTube, whether now my YouTube thing is now my algorithms change a little bit into small business and things like that. And then there are other things that I just learned from talking to other owners of things. So it really is kind of all over the place. I don't really, I'm not a reader. I mean, my parents knew from a young age that if they needed me to get to sleep, they would just start reading to me and I would just zonk out. It's just not for me. Um, but listening to business podcasts is where I get a large part of my background for growing a business. There are so many business podcasts that are out there. Um, uh, I'm trying to think of the one podcast. Uh, Man, I'm blanking on it now. It's it's about like mindfulness in general. Um, Man, I'm gonna blank on it, but maybe I'll look it up. Um, but having my information come from a lot of different sources is kind of important to me because then I can
Mhm.
make sense of it myself. I need to get a lot of information and then step back and digest it, and that's kind of the best way that I learn. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, I mean nothing specific in terms of books and stuff like that. I mean, I actually did started listening to the Audible books that you had recommended. Right now, I'm on Two Brain Business, and I
Mhm.
think that they have a second version of that I'm going to get into after. I'm curious to see how much it's changed or if their advice has changed. But um, for me, it's kind of when I need to learn something, I just dive right into it with at least one medium. So entrepreneurship.
Mhm.
I took the entrepreneurship course at Wharton, and it was like a deep dive into it. And then I stepped back and kind of gauge what I could do from it, and
Mhm.
what's stuck. Um, but yeah, that's kind of where I learn. I just kind of take it from a lot of different sources.
I love that. So I know you also have a podcast. I know that, and you do the commission work. Where can people, especially local, where can they reach out to kind of either get an idea on commission work, or if they want to check
Sure.
out, the Makerspace? What's the best way to get in contact with you?
Sure. So for commission work, the company is called Shop Woodworking. It's a name that means absolutely nothing. But it was just a fun, silly word. So that's mostly on Instagram. So it's Shop Woodworking, WHOASHOP Woodworking. So that's where I post most of my pieces and most of my stuff. Even when I'm posting with stuff for the Makerspace, I'm really posting there too as well because that's where my following is. Um,
Mhm.
and then, as terms of the makerspace, so it's at Montco Makers. So Montgomery County is where I really want this. Even if it ends up being in Bucks County, I'm calling it Montco anyway. But Montco-makers.com is where you can find the signups for the mailing list. We're actually having a whole thing, a big mailer is going out on Tuesday, tomorrow morning, for $10 gift cards. So if you buy a $10 gift card, it's kind of a class reservation for when we open. So you'll be first in line to register for classes. Um, and that is really a mechanism for showing the bank demand for the makerspace. We opened it 2 days ago and we had almost 40 people already reserve classes, which is really awesome. The nice part about it is that I'll be able to show the bank, hey, whatever it is, 160 people reached into their wallets and gave us $10 to hold their spot.
Mhm.
And that's not knowing when classes start, not knowing what classes are. They just are so interested that it's worth $10 to them to like be first in line. That's going to be enough to sell the idea that yes, we know that this is in demand, which is really cool. So that is going to be at monco-makers.com. And then same thing, Monco Makers without the dash on Instagram. And we'll be on social media. You won't be able to hide from us once we start getting close to opening, because I'm going to be doing massive media pushes everywhere. But
Awesome.
yeah, and if you want to follow along, the podcast that we run is called Make It While You Fake It, because that's essentially what it has felt like starting this business. I'm just going along with it until until it happens. But we're on all the Spotify and Apple and YouTube and all the different streaming services. But that's a podcast of documenting starting a makerspace from just an idea. And we started that back in January. And it used to be every week. Now it's spread out every month just because I'm very busy. But we talk to other teachers, instructors that are going to be part of it and all this different stuff. So it's fun. And we have a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, I love that. And I'll include all the links to all of those in the show descriptions and make sure to include in all that, so everybody can make it as easy as possible to reach out to you and get involved in it. And if they're interested.
No, absolutely. And we plan on, if everything goes well, we plan on being open in summer of 2025. So that is now the goal of 2025, is to get open. So halfway there.
Love that. Love it. Awesome. Well, good stuff, man. This has been great. I appreciate you coming on. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.